By 2006, the British and the Americans realized that their project to bring democracy to Afghanistan was failing. And large parts of the country were descending into anarchy. In Helmand, in southern Afghanistan, armed groups had risen up and there was constant fighting. The coalition were convinced that this was the return of the Taliban, and British troops were sent there to restore order and to help protect the regional government. But when the British commanders asked the Ministry of Defence for information about what was happening in Helmand, there was none. There weren't even any satellites looking at it. They had all been moved to look at Iraq. The one thing they did know was that they were going to the very heartland of the tribe that had decisively defeated the British 125 years before at the Battle of Maiwand. The British commander called a meeting of the local elders. It was in the very same town that the American engineers had built 50 years before, when they were constructing the dam across the Helmand River.
All three of us for security, for governance and for development. We are the three who work together for the British. I know you've seen many foreigners arriving in your country.
The commander reassured the elders that the British were there to defeat the Taliban and support the regional government.
My forefathers were even here before, on the banks of the British.
Next door, his officers were preparing to entertain the elders with a showing of David Attenborough's series, The Blue Planet. But the elders thought that the British had completely misunderstood the problem. The real enemy was not the Taliban, but the corrupt and vicious government that President Karzai had installed in Helmand and was doing nothing to stop.
Until Mr. President Karzai doesn't bring a good governance, the security situation will be the same. If you are here for 100 years, it will be not good. Once he brought good governance, good people to the government, then we have hope that security-wise will be changed.
The elders left without watching The Blue Planet. Before they came to Helmand, the British had forced President Karzai to get rid of its governor. But they didn't realize that he had left behind him a completely corrupted society. And nothing was what it seemed. When the British went into towns like Sangin, they tried to support the police. But the police were really the armed militia for the sacked governor. To the locals, this meant that the Western troops were supporting their oppressors. So they started to attack the British.
Get inside! Shit, that's close, that one out the back there. It was. Right, mate, get under. See what? Shit. They're overshooting on us.
Stay down, lads, stay down.
Hey, is that incoming, alright? Come in.
Fucking incoming, no? Incoming.
The British thought that this must mean they were Taliban. So in response, they dropped giant bombs on them.
Fucking hell. Did you get that, did you? Yes, I did.
Fucking hell.
Holy shit.
But this then devastated the town centres, which made even more local people join in the attacks. Seeing their chance, the real ideological Taliban, who were now based in Pakistan, flooded back in, and they started attacking the British too. At the same time, the corrupt militias, who worked for the local government, also turned against the British. Faced by the chaos, the British still clung to their simple narrative of good and evil. They, the Western forces, were good, and all the different groups who were attacking them were Taliban and were bad. But this extraordinary simplification had terrible consequences. Because if you were an Afghan and wanted to kill a rival, all you had to do was go to the British and tell them that he was a Taliban, and the British would obediently wipe him out. The British were being used. The terrible truth was that the British presence did not contain the war. It did the very opposite. It escalated it so much that it ran out of control. And the bodies, Afghan and British, piled up.
The dynamic was one of manipulation. They understood how we saw the conflict. They presented their local group conflict, their civil war between groups that had been going on for 35 years. They presented everything in that dynamic. So they came to us and said, those people over there are Taliban. And we went, okay, and we went off and dealt with them. But actually we were dealing with their previous enemies, so we were just creating more enemies for ourselves. And you ended up in a downward spiral where, because everyone was manipulating us, we ended up fighting everyone. And then in return, everyone who fought us immediately became Taliban. The way that we decided whether you were Taliban or not was whether you were firing at us. Post-2001, whereas we've understood the conflict as good, bad, black, white, government, Taliban, they've understood it as a shifting mosaic of different groups and leaders fighting each other, effectively over power. And the currency of power in Helmand is opium. That's largely what the conflict's about.
So what you're saying is that what we thought were the Taliban was actually an allergic reaction to us turning up into the middle of a complex civil war.
Correct.
We made things worse.
Yes.